saving our mangroves, how biosas green gold can fight climate change and poverty. We are talking about something that is really holding our land together, but we are cutting it down every day. Nigeria has the largest mangrove forest in Africa and the third largest globally, with approximately 80% of it concentrated in the Niger Delta region, which is our region. Now, within Nigeria, Bayelsa State contains the single largest share of these mangrove resources, followed by Delta State and Rivers State. Bayelsa's vast mangrove forests are a powerful green gold that can trap massive amounts of carbon, stop coastal erosion, and rebuild rural incomes. Protecting and restoring these fragile wetlands offers a practical way to fight climate change while lifting Niger Delta communities out of poverty. And of course, to do justice to that, we have a guest in the studio who is seated right away, Dr. Gijo Harry, who is an environmentalist, senior lecturer and researcher, Department of Biological Sciences, Niger Delta University. Good morning, and thanks for being here.
Good morning. It's my pleasure.
Yeah, we appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you very much.
It's okay. So you're talking about mangrove, and I'm just saying for the first time that it's green gold. It's green gold. So what do you have to say about that first and foremost?
Yeah, mangroves are actually salt-tolerant trees. They grow in the estuaries, and they are characterized by the possession of prop roots. And basically, their soils are quite unique because they actually produce peaty soils that have live, partially decomposed organic matter. And we have quite a lot of these mangrove species in the estuaries, especially when we say estuaries, I mean areas that are close to the ocean, tidally influenced ecological systems where fresh water mixes with salt water and the river opens up into the ocean. And they are found in areas like Brass, Okwoma, Akasa, various communities in Akasa clan, in Kolama area. Then they are also found around the Age area in the Kirimo local government area, and in Nembe and many other parts of Bayelsa State. Outside Bayelsa, they are found in Cross River State, Akwa Ibom State, River State, and even in Delta State, also found in Lagos State actually. So basically, these salt-tolerant trees are actually very important. They play very serious ecological roles that affect those that are in the immediate environment and also impact on the global community. So these plants are actually black gold, as you green gold, as you green gold, as you just mentioned. Green gold, as you've mentioned.
Yes. So how exactly are these mangroves protecting our coastal communities from climate change? Let's go to the axis first.
Yeah, the mangroves are very good at carbon sequestration. Okay. Now, carbon sequestration basically means the ability of a plant to remove carbon from the atmosphere, to remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, store it in their tissues to form biomass. The mangroves, they do more than that. They sequester carbon, and the carbon is sequestered both in their tissues, in their biomass, and also in the soil, in the mangrove environment, in the form of peat. So that's why when you go to the mangrove environment, you see quite a lot of partially decomposed mangrove parts that can remain there for several centuries or for several years without decomposing. So that peaty nature helps to store excess carbon. And now that carbon, carbon dioxide is basically is a greenhouse gas that's responsible for climate change. Carbon dioxide, methane, and other greenhouse gases trap the heat from the sun that's supposed to be reflected back, and that actually causes global warming. But these plants, the mangroves, are able to remove the carbon from the atmosphere and store it in their tissues and also in the soil. And that's actually a very important role they play, because reducing carbon in the atmosphere helps to reduce the impacts of climate change. And this is basically a very important role they play in prevention of climate change.
Okay. So how does it affect? Because you mentioned that there's a degree of how it affects those staying at the immediate environment and then the larger society.
Yes.
So what's the difference?
Yeah, the first one I just discussed now, carbon sequestration, is the climate change is a global problem. So the mangroves actually remove carbon more than five times what the tropical rainforest can achieve. So they are very good at carbon sequestration, and basically that removal of carbon affects the global community because climate change is a global problem.
Yeah.
Now, locally, the mangroves play very important roles too in local communities. Basically, as they serve as a buffer between the land and the sea. Basically, they protect the land from encroachment from the sea, and they protect the soil from erosion. The soils of the mangroves have a lot of roots. The roots of the mangrove hold the soil together and prevents it from being eroded. The mangroves also play a very important role as nature's shield against storms, cyclones, and even tsunamis. Basically, because they form dense thickets, the mangrove forest so thick, it prevents the wind from hitting local communities directly, because they are actually at the fringes of the rivers. So basically, they help in that area too. Basically, the mangroves also serve as a source of timber and non-timber products. Basically, the locals cut down mangroves to dry their fish, and some also make use of them to construct homes and other very vital things. The mangrove ecosystem also provides medicinal value, because the mangrove leaves and barks are also collected by locals to make various medicines to cure various illnesses. Mangroves also help in water purification. They purify the water by taking out toxic substances, and the mangrove ecosystem serve as a nursery ground for aquatic organisms, the fish, the prawns, the shrimps.
Yes, I was coming to that. So let's go straight to how it can help community generate income. Beyond the environment, how are mangroves directly tied to food security and income for people living in the rural areas?
Yeah, like I said just now, they serve as nursery ground for fish and other aquatic organisms. So the young fish have shelter. They seek shelter around the mangroves, and that also prevents them from easily being targeted by humans and other resident or other aquatic organisms, basically, and aquatic organisms. And because the mangroves are the primary producers of the estuarine ecosystem, they provide food for the fish, and because of that, the fish population thrives. The mangroves serve as primary producers. The fish feed on those organisms that feed on the leaves, stems, and other parts of the mangroves. Aside from that, the mangroves also serve as a source of livelihood to local populace, because people get many vital things from the mangroves by getting timber from them, and also basically ecotourism. Medicine. And ecotourism is also a very important part of the mangrove ecosystem. In some countries, people travel to such environments to appreciate, to see the beauty of the mangrove ecosystem. I had taken some of my students to such areas, and I see how amazed they were to see the beautiful environment, a beautiful mangrove environment. So it's a source of ecotourism, and local communities can make a lot of money from it. Yeah, basically. Okay.
Now let's talk about the damage done to these mangroves.
Yeah.
As a way of survival as well. So now, from your research, what is the real economic cost to Bayelsa each time we destroy 1 hectare of mangrove for firewood or sand filling or timber or any of these activities?
Yeah, just as you mentioned, the mangrove ecosystem is constantly being threatened by anthropogenic activities. Yeah, people cut down the mangroves, and one very dangerous part of it is that instead of just using them for their immediate needs, people are now diverting their attention from trees that are in the rainforest to mangrove trees. And they cut them down consistently and transport them to other parts of the state or the country for sale, because the mangrove trees are actually quite hard and they are quite resilient, they are quite strong and durable. So people are now shifting attention to the mangrove ecosystem, and this actually is affecting the mangroves. Another problem that affects the mangroves is oil pollution, crude oil pollution, and the persistent release of such contaminants, such pollutants, threaten the mangrove. It causes death, massive death of the mangroves, and also stunts the growth of mangrove species. And some other persons clear the mangroves for agricultural purposes, which also affects the mangroves. And one very funny part is that some people see mangroves as areas that make communities to look underdeveloped. So they clear the mangroves so that the communities will look more urban. And that's actually a sea level. And basically that rise in green gold that help to reduce such natural disasters are being cut down yearly. And that is actually costing us a lot. You see the economic loss we experience. People get displaced from their homes. People lost valuables that they wouldn't have lost, because they keep cutting down these plants that would have prevented them from having these impacts from climate change. Now, invasive species are also very important threats to the mangrove ecosystem. The Nipa palms are now taking over the mangroves. They were introduced into Nigeria, and these plants actually were brought in to control erosion. They were first taken into the Cross River area, the Oron Beach, and these exotic species have spread to various parts of the Niger Delta and are causing havoc, especially in the Andoni River estuary around the Oyorokoto area. If you go to such a place, you just see that the mangroves have been completely displaced by Nipa palms, and that's a serious threat. So the mangrove ecosystem need to be saved, and it's you and I, that should put hands together to ensure that we protect this vulnerable and very vital ecosystem.
Okay, you talked about oil spills. To what extent can it destroy our mangroves?
Yeah, the oil spills actually cause death of the mangroves, and it also affects the organisms in the mangrove ecosystem, not just the mangrove, but other organisms in the mangrove ecosystem. And such spills actually persist in the mangrove ecosystem for a long period of time. I've been carrying out a research on the impact of the mangroves and the recovery of mangroves years after chronic pollution of the River Nile estuary. And I found out that the impacts that took place about 9 years ago are still continuous, and they are
affecting them. So that's all where you talked about not just the mangrove but other organisms that live within the area. So you can go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. So basically, crude oil pollution is a very serious threat because it causes massive mortality of mangroves, and such impacts actually affect the mangrove ecosystem, not just for a short period of time, but for a prolonged period, because the crude oil persists in the soil for a long period of time, especially in creeks especially. So it's a very serious challenge of the mangrove ecosystem.
Okay, in your experience as you move around different places, what is the worst sight that you have seen concerning the mangrove that really makes you sad?
Yes, there was a time makeshift oil refineries were very abundant, especially in the Lebanon estuary in Akasa clan. And these makeshift oil refinery activities actually cause chronic pollution.
This is bullfire?
Yeah, bullfire, yeah. They actually pollute the environment. Sometimes even the law enforcement agencies, instead of helping to protect our environment, they even do worse. They burn their equipment and even their boats and spill the crude oil in the creek and in our creeks and rivers, and this actually causes serious death of mangroves. And sometimes while they burn these vessels, they even get to the mangrove forest and burns the mangrove forest. So basically, when you go to such places, you see a very vast area of land being destroyed by fire and even the crude oil. So such actually is a very awful sight to see, that the Nigerian government doesn't even take into consideration the impacts of their own activities too. More impact is even caused by the law enforcement agencies, the Navy, that go to apprehend these persons that are involved in artisanal refinery activities. So that should also be taken into consideration.
Yes, I was about to ask if we have any current environmental protection laws in Bayelsa State.
Yeah, we have the laws, but implementation is the problem. We have, Nigeria is a kind of country where we have beautiful things on paper, but zero implementation.
So there are laws actually?
Yes, there are.
There are laws, but no implementation. That's
exactly.
the issue. So if it's implemented, you think things will change drastically?
Yes, things should.
Okay. Now, what sustainable alternative livelihood to replace destructive logging and charcoal burning?
Yeah, basically there are some other alternative sources of livelihood, especially if communities can look into ecotourism. They should make their mangrove environment very attractive, especially they can create low impact boardwalks in the mangrove environment so that people can, apart from mangroves, for necessary use, basically when we want to build houses or for other purposes or even for sale. That's constructive and that's sustainable use. They should be used sustainably. And even the mangroves can be used. God has given us these plants to utilize. That's why you rightly call them the green gold, isn't it? Yeah. And so they are there for us to use, but sustainable use is very important. We should use them sustainably, especially if we want to cut them, we can cut very matured mangrove trees, not clearing an entire area. And they should not be constantly exported. They should not be constantly exported. And the plants there should be a replanting. When mangrove trees are cut, there should be effort to replant. And that will help to replenish the ones that have been cut down. There are also some other alternative sources of livelihood, like fishing. Those in the local environment, the mangrove environment, can go into fishing. Fishing is the source of life. In fact, the mangroves help to replenish the fish population in the river because the fish depend on the mangroves. So when we protect the mangroves, we also have fish to eat. Then we also have other means of livelihood. Basically, if we can, instead of using mangroves, the firewoods from mangroves for cooking, we can make use of gas or other sources of energy or to cook instead of firewood. In fact, it's even safer to use gas to cook, because if someone uses mangroves, they inhale very toxic smoke from the activity. So those are alternative ways, alternative things they can do instead of depending solely on the mangroves.
Okay.